As Randy mentioned, I'm just going to give, so it's pretty formal, I'm going to give a background in terms of, just so everyone's on the same page in terms of what the effort is, how it came about in terms of our involvement. So again, if I'm repeating things, I'm sorry if but I think it's good that we're all just on the same page in terms of some background and what have you. So for the purposes of the comprehensive plan project, I'm not exactly sure to have to confirm with Mike Klein-Peter. So the county works with Mike Klein-Peter as a grant consultant. And so he identified, as he does with a variety of things, I'm sure, that the state Office of Community and Rural Affairs, we call it OCRA, so you hear that acronym quite a bit, OCRA. They provide some grants for planning services and other things. You may have gotten some other OCRA grants for various infrastructure projects or other kind of things. So they also provide study grants for communities, counties, etc., to prepare comprehensive plans. That goes through a competitive process, as Randy alluded to, that a few months ago the county went after. They solicited a request for proposals or qualifications that our office, Taylor Secret Williams Design Group, responded to. We then subsequently made a small presentation, and by the virtue of kind of the, selection process, we're selected by the county to be the facilitators of the comprehensive plan. The caveat for always any kind of OCRA planning process that we work on is that only happens if then the entity is successful in receiving their grant. So there's no work if obviously you don't, you as a community or a county don't receive your grant award. So that application then went in. As part of the grant application, you always have to identify, who are you working with? The state wants to make sure you're ready to go if they give you the money, right? So that all went in, and again, Mike Klein-Peter coordinated, all of that in terms of his administrative duties on your grant application. That was successful, so the state did award, OCRA did award the grant to you, and then subsequently we have been contracted. That went through the county attorney's review and what have you in terms of the typical, contracting purposes. So for us then to complete the comprehensive plan under the sort of the state guidelines. So when I say the state guidelines, if a community, county, whoever is completing a comp plan in state statute, it articulates that a comprehensive plan has three broad elements that are addressed. So those include kind of a broad vision statement, and then specifically statute asks you to address land use, community facilities, things like your utilities, infrastructure, that sort of thing, and transportation. And then it leaves, in the statute, it leaves very broadly in terms of, and other items could be addressed depending on what's appropriate or inappropriate in the community, and it gives you some suggestions. OCRA, so the particular office where your grant came from.
So who determines any other items that may be addressed besides the ones you just mentioned?
So that's
state status?
OCRA.
Okay.
Yep. So in terms of the grant specifically, so if you were doing it locally funded, then you as a community, and with your consultant or whoever's helping to facilitate it, can put in some other things. Maybe it's a downtown, maybe it's whatever. There's a variety of things that you could sort of identify. By going through the OCRA process, then they articulate 14 or 13, I always lose my number there, 13 or 14 specific elements that they call subject matter or plan elements that we have to address. So as part
have to? That's a must? Okay.
13 plan elements that you have to address. And it includes the ones that are in state. So, obviously the ones that are in the statute, the land use, transportation, and community facilities are part of the 13. And then they give you a list of additionally, the community or county needs to address these other subject matter elements. And I can just read them off to you. So land use, government and fiscal capacity, public facilities and services, community facilities and services, placemaking, economic development, housing, transportation, and that includes, when I say transportation, that's like vehicular, pedestrian, bicycle, any kind of mode of transportation is in that category. Agriculture, natural resources, parks and recreation, broadband access, historic and archaeological resources, and hazard mitigation. So in some communities that we work in, some of those elements may be more prevalent or a higher priority than others, but we have to at least somehow address each one of those.
How are those priorities determined?
Through the process, in terms
Through
of
the process.
Yeah. So for instance, if a community is really working on, and I'll use parks and recreation as an example, if they're really working on advancing, maybe acquisition for additional parkland or what have you as a community, then clearly that's a community priority. And so that plan element or that plan section will have some detail regarding that. Say broadband as an example, in that same community or that same county, their service is fairly positive. They've already worked through, upgrades to broadband or technology services, so it's not necessarily maybe something that they're really needing to improve upon. We address it, that we acknowledge, here's kind of what the status is, but it's not necessarily like something that is needed, or what, obviously it's needed, that's not the right word. It's not necessarily something that they need to focus on because they've already achieved that. Mm-hmm. So we do address it, but you can kind of see maybe that how became two different sort of levels of focus. But we do still, in the planning process, have to go through and document that. When you submit your materials then back as a draft to Okra, they literally go through, and that's the difference when you're doing it through the grant process versus just a locally funded process. Okra will go through each category and make sure that you addressed each one of them. And for their purposes, it's usually not, so again, just using like the Parks and Rec as an example there, they don't necessarily comment on whether or not we agree with the fact you're trying to acquire additional land for parkland. That's not what they're going to comment on. What they will comment on is if you in fact did not address parks and recreation or didn't have some community input regarding that. That's, so they don't comment on like the judgmental of is this appropriate or not appropriate. They will literally look like on the criteria, is this addressed or acknowledged in some sort of form or fashion. So they go through their criteria list because they want to make sure that you're meeting the sort of the statement of criteria that is put forward in terms of meeting the grant requirements that they set forth. So from that standpoint, it's a little more rigid because literally, and I have two samples here that we can kind of pass around, and one is a county level, one is a community level, but there doesn't matter if it's a county or a community, you have to go through the same, so here I just randomly flip, this is the hazard mitigation chapter for Oakland City. Blackford will have the same thing. They will have a hazard, but you have to put it in the order that they requested. So the flexibility to kind of customize the plan is a little bit defined only because you're going through the Okra process and we have to go through each of these plan element criteria. If that
Can you
makes
go
sense.
beyond that if the need's identified?
Within those categories, yes. I think from Okra's standpoint, they're hoping that each of the categories pretty much covers holistically things that a community needs to look at or address, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I'm gonna pass these around.
So this is more of like an outline type of thing.
Yeah, you can think of it as that way, sure. And this is all on the state's website. So, this criteria that they outline is available on their state's website. Yep.
The state's website for the Okra rules?
Yes.
Because I'd like to have that list. I didn't.
Yep.
write it all down.
So,
Talking about
If you have
the
it.
list of the 13.
Yeah.
I think I have that in my office from when you guys present.
yeah, so if you go to, and I probably could hook up here too wirelessly, what have you, if you go to, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs and, community planning grants.
Well, since we're making a video of this
Yeah.
for other people to watch, let's make that real clear someplace so that people can go to that. website if they want to. I'm talking to whoever's.
Because that's.
That will watch
We
this.
follow, because we
Yeah.
know we have to, when we turn in our draft for the, the plan, we know that that's what they are going to.
Yeah, so yeah, let's
Yeah.
just spell that out
Yeah.
real clearly for anybody that watches this one. And I want to take.
And the Area Plan Commission had a meeting where Scott was via the television to kind of give us an overview of that. I can't remember when that took place, but we did have one.
I want to say that was
And this whole grant process, I mean, we're past the point of no return, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We can't turn it
we're locked.
down. We're locked. Okay.
And, considering our executive director situation, I asked Mike if there was any potential possibility to delay it. He said, no, we are fixed.
no, you're set in
That's why
now.
we're having this
Yeah.
meeting today.
Because just in general, when, yeah, we'll leave that for later, because of later discussion. I don't want to take us off topic.
What's the tab you go to? Community development block grants?
No, there should be a planning grant one. Trying to see if I can get hooked to.
That, or if you want to just send it to me in an email, I can put it on our website too, to make it easier for people. You know how to get to our website, so.
So I
To get
see
to the
this-
county
Is there
website.
a public one here?
So I can
that
put it on our county website, on our page for the office, and do it that
Okay.
way to make it easier.
Yeah. Tell them.
I mean, I said it.
Yeah, I know.
It's asking for a password. I don't see a public. It's just an open public one here. The county,
I
is there a public
shouldn't
one?
have a password.
So the Grant County Wi-Fi is asking for a security password.
Yeah, I
Can't
think
password.
they're all secured.
Yeah, I don't see a public, a Grant County public.
Do you have my hotspot?
Maybe I could do mine here.
Yeah, they're all locked, I know.
I thought we had an open one for some reason.
I know the passwords are difficult.
You're not wrong.
While he's doing that, we probably should go around and introduce ourselves.
Okay.
Since, we're being recorded, that way,
You're gonna start?
and just who you represent.
Okay, I'm Katie Cable. I am technically the Grant County Code Enforcement Officer, but my job is everywhere right now. So
You've been diversified.
I'm the jack of all trades right now.
Todd Clancy, citizen representative here.
Shane Middlesworth, Grant County Council representative.
Randy Atkiss, president of the APC, Area Planning Commission.
Dana Richmond, I'm a member of the Area Planning Commission.
Scott Siefker with Taylor Siefker Williams Design Group.
I honestly don't know how you say that. It's like a tongue twister.
Taylor Siefker Williams Design Group. It's my, so the other business partners for us, Ron Taylor and Amy Williams, have, the Taylor, very easy names, right? So my name went in the middle, that was the hard name.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, I think I've got access here now, so let's see here.
In the scope of work, as far as, I guess my question would be, when the comprehensive plan's compiled, Gas City and the city of Marion are not within area plan.
Right there
Will we-
excluded. Uh-huh.
Will we attach their comprehensive plans to ours, or are we gonna have to?
So what we usually do, so as an example, so Blackford you have here, I'll just use that one as a reference. Hartford City, is excluded. Or it could be any kind of situation, but we typically would just reference, like if a community has their own adopted or current comprehensive plan, we reference that. Mapping and other graphics, in essence, it's sort of a white hole. Think of it that way, right? Because you're not overlaying something to a neighborhood community that has their own. You would just reference that, and then it doesn't become part of this because that's a standalone, like, that's a separate adopted thing. It's just referenced in terms of things that maybe need to sort of connect. So for instance, from a transportation standpoint, if a community, so if Marion is planning some trail, and it makes logical sense that like a connection would sort of happen, we would want to know like, well, where are they planning that a logical connection from the county side could be, as an example. So that's how, it would sort of be referenced, but it does not supersede or include any independent communities comprehensive plan. That those are each standalone pieces, administered separately. Yep.
What do we do with Swayze who's not?
So on the website.
Well, if that's the case, then you've got Swayze, Converse, and Allerton that aren't. So,
Is there a way for me to like share this, or I can email it then to somebody?
are you inside the meeting on your computer?
Inside the meeting.
Yeah, because I know IT is right now, just to keep it going. But if you join our meeting on your laptop, I can hold it that way.
Okay, I could do that. So how would I join the meeting?
Go to our Grant County website for area plan.
Okay.
Hover above the offices, hover over area plan, and where's it at? Public meeting information. And there should be.
My concern is that we get started, we're supposed to be attending any community activities such as James Dean Days.
I knew it was somewhere.
I am.
We just updated the course too, so I still.
No, it's, yeah.
Some of that because that's
We'll make it work,
supposed to
right?
set a boost.
I just thought if they can project it, they can see it, right?
Right. That's the only way. I know if this doesn't work, I will go grab that TV.
Or
No clue.
if you're, I can email this to you.
Oakland, California, right? Kind of a big place, lots of people.
Okay, well, we can do this later.
Surveys. This is all.
Okay, it looks like
right?
something's opening.
This is the data input. Like that's from the percentage of the population standpoint.
Oh, I know.
Think about that.
I know.
It's,
I know.
and that's what you're trying to address, is to bring more people, more people, to make it a valid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to get people just from these organizations to serve on the steering committee.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, in the steering committee,
So is that?
I mean, that's about what you have here.
Mary?
And that's the total data that they put in it. No, you gotta go back and figure out how to get surveys, more surveys. So what you're saying, that's why I'm tying it in, I was gonna keep this, and not say anything about it until later, is what we need is put moves out, and take this money that, to make this beautiful look, and take that money and get it out to these different events and build the survey. The N number of participants, right, that are answering these answers, that's where I want to put the money. It's not giving it to a firm to make this beautiful book, but let's have really good, hard data, right? Because if you don't have good data, your conclusion's not going to be good.
That's a
Okay,
challenge.
it looks like.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, we're having a space-time continuum here.
There you go.
Okay, so now let me see if I can share.
I can't see that. I know I'm not the presenter anymore.
Okay, did the share screen thing work?
Yeah, I'm making it bigger.
So what I've done is I've pulled up the Okra page, obviously there's other things on their website, but I've gone to their planning grants tab. So you can kind of see in terms of an introduction, in terms of a variety of their planning grants. You can see different things communities to qualify for. What you as a county went after was the, comprehensive planning grant. The application instructions you went through, like Mike, that's what you did with, when I say you, the county, did with Mike, and he facilitated, all of that. So then for our purposes, in terms of the facilitators of kind of the planning process, the minimum plan requirements that you see down here, the comprehensive plan is the one that you were awarded. And so
Yeah.
that then gives you, in essence, the Okra outline, for lack of a better word, that you were mentioning there, like the Okra outline for what it is that we have to follow. And so you can see they're fairly detailed in terms of, I'll try to enlarge that here. They're fairly detailed in terms of, again, the sample follows that, right? Like the flexibility to kind of modify some things. They literally have their checklist and they go through, did we see these things, right? And they follow that. So you can kind of see there's an executive summary that they ask for, the sort of the general background, which is your demographic analysis, what have you. The discussion of your comprehensive planning committee or your steering committee. So that's one of the things that obviously we're talking about here in terms of kind of the organization of that particular group. And then the fourth section, or section D here, that is the bulk of the meat of the plan, and that includes the plan elements that I rattled off, and you can kind of, there you go. Yeah, you can kind of see them there in terms of the, the 1 through 13, the land use, government fiscal capacity, all the way down to hazard mitigation. And you can see in bold, they must be in this order. So you can follow along there and see that they're covered in each of those order. For each of those plan elements, there'll be an analysis in terms of a summary of existing conditions. So what is your existing conditions related to broadband? What is your existing condition in the county related to economic, whatever the subject matter is? Then it goes through, okay, as a community, what are you trying to do? That's your vision and goal for that, that plan element. And then the implementation or the recommendations for that plan element. So in the samples there that are kind of floating around, you can see that it follows along with that. We also try to obviously tie in some of the public engagement or public conversation. So we often include that both internally to the actual plan element section of each individual piece, as well as then include either an appendix or a separate section 14, just as a community public input wise, this is sort of what was facilitated and what was documented and what have you. We often will include, if there's some online surveys, we'll include the raw, we'll make some summaries of that, obviously in terms of the internal book, but and as appendices, we often include some additional material that may be like the, kind of the raw data from a survey. We also include as an appendices maybe a tool and resource kit. So for instance, there are current funding programs or other kind of things that may be applicable to some of the ideas in the comprehensive plan. And here's, a glossary or an index of, these resources that could be used. Those kind of things obviously change over time, kind of they come and go, with the various federal or state programs. Sometimes, when you're doing a comp plan, right, and if, year one program exists, but in year 5, so that's what we don't necessarily say that everything has to be tied to this particular, this is the only way you can get it accomplished, because, that program may not be funded in 4 years, or a new program may be, we have a new administration at the state level that will be coming, clearly hopefully next year, there may be some new programs that are created that are unknown at the time that may be applicable to maybe some of your ideas or recommendations that, you could use to move those forward. But, we don't, those kind of things come and go. As an appendices, we usually try to give you at least some sort of resource kit at that snapshot in time of like, here's, some toolkit of how things could move along with an acknowledgement of like, some things come and go. That's just the nature of kind of a comprehensive plan timeline, is that over a period of years that, you're referencing this, some other things may be applicable or some other things may maybe not be funded to maybe support different programs, just it depends. So
Scott, who are the players in this and what roles do they serve?
So from a standpoint of just the functionality of it, at the highest level, it would be obviously us trying to help kind of facilitate and guide the process as the sort of the doers.
Now, when you say doers, what?
The crafting and writing and kind of documentation and what have you, the mapping, all the graphics, all of those kind of things.
That's
So,
what your company does.
correct.
When you say us.
Correct, yeah, when I'm saying us, I'm referring to our firm, our office, yeah.
Okay.
So, kind of doing the kind of the overall plan development and facilitation of the process.
How much involvement do you have in the collection of information?
So with regards to, as example, like demographics or input? or-
Receiving input from
Yeah.
the community.
So oftentimes we will try to guide or help all of that. Most of the time the community will ask, like, we'll do all of that. So we'll create, so in our scope of work, and I can send this, so that the contract that we have with the county has an attachment that's the process, the scope of work, and it outlines kind of the series of kind of steps that kind of the process takes. And so from our group as facilitators, we go through each one of these steps. And so let me backtrack a little bit in terms of sort of the other players. So we have sort of our group that helps on the facilitation side. Then we have the contracting agency, which in this case is the county, right? So they are sort of the fiduciary agent. And then we have the project steering committee or comprehensive plan committee, whatever you want to call it, that advisory group or that steering committee. They typically meet, and kind of what we had outlined here in terms of the process, 3 to 4 times.
Over the 1 year period of time?
Correct. Yes, correct. And those benchmarks are typically one that's more in like a beginning sort of conversational stage where it's more of a visioning. So big ideas, just general, issues, strengths of the county, just sort of big idea conversations.
When do you think that'll take place in this county?
So that typically happens in the sort of the first couple of months once we get the process started. So that's
When do
fairly.
you see the process starting?
For us, I think as soon as we can get the steering committee together, get that group organized and an invitation to a meeting, that would be that meeting. So,
What was the start date that the contract was signed, which I'm assuming is when the timeline starts with Okra?
yes, so that's a bit of a challenge, and I know that, I don't know if you've spoken to Mike. Let's see here.
So essentially, that steering committee's first meeting needs to happen sometime this month.
Ideally,
Okay.
yes. I'm looking up here the date, because the one I have here is an assigned one, but I can find the date here real quick.
It was in May, wasn't it?
I would,
I think it was.
It was announced, I thought, at May 6th meeting that the contract had been signed.
That's right.
Which would have been that morning.
So I don't know if it was that day or it's
I think
prior
it
to
was
May
that
6th.
morning on the 6th.
I know it was proposed to the commissioners and there were some concerns and it took a month or two in order to get those concerns
so
worked out.
your challenge is, our contract was signed by Commissioner Wright on the 6th of May, so that's correct. However, your timeline starts from the state's perspective when you are awarded the funding. And so the funding award Mike would have, and my guess is that
That was a couple months before.
that's my guess. Yes, because it took a while, as you're describing, to get it to the contract. So our contract to sort of do anything, was, there in May, but your award of funds,
I was thinking March, April, somewhere in there.
so that would be what he would have. And from the state's perspective, that is always another bit of a challenge, is like they start the clock when they give you the funds, even though no community's like, we don't have anything ready to go. You have it ready to go, but not, on day
Don't
one,
jump
you're
the gun
not,
type
on day
thing,
one, you're
too.
not starting out, you don't have that ready to go. So I'm not exactly sure when your award of funds, when I say your, the county's award of funds occurred, but my guess is it's probably
I think
something
it was
like
the
that.
middle of March when that happened,
Yeah.
if I remember right.
So the key to this, I think, is always being very clear in communication with your grant administrator. They obviously are the liaison to Okra, the state, and so if there are any kind of things that, in terms of some, modifications or whatever, Okra does not withdraw, like, it's not like they're gonna be like, oh, you've paid us money, but you don't have the money, it's, you get the money, we don't bill to draw down from the funds, only 2 times. So it's not like they wrote a check to the county and the county's holding on to this money, or whoever, the county's not holding on to this money, this $50,000, they're not holding on to that. It's just sitting there. That's not how that works. So what would happen, and contractually how any of the Okra projects works, you can only bill for the drawdown of the funds twice, at 60% completion of the project and then at 100%. So for our work, we work 60% of the whole thing before we can even send invoice number 1 to the county and Mike. Mike then works to get that drawdown and what have you. So from Okra's perspective, it's not like you're sitting on some money that no one's, using. Why they put kind of sort of the grant deadline on things in general. Mike can certainly, I don't want to overstep my bounds in terms of the grant administration side of things, but I think he would explain that it's, they want to ensure that communities that are awarded any kind of these kind of fundings, whether it's dollars for infrastructure, planning work, what have you, they want to ensure that communities are, advancing it and spending it. So if they don't give like a time horizon, you could be sitting on something for years, potentially, and, then that money is obligated, whereas if some other community could have used it, then they could have, awarded it to somebody else, if that makes sense. So I think that's conceptually why there's sort of those timeline horizons on it. There's not necessarily a penalty. If you don't get finished by X date, it's not like, oh, you have a 10%. That kind of scenario doesn't exist. And again, he could explain that, those kind of logistics, certainly better than I, as he deals with that side of things, with a variety of communities, counties, regions, what have you. But fundamentally, that's how that works.
So Scott, what I'm after is, I'm after a clear understanding of what responsibility the different people or different groups are going to serve in this.
Sure. Yeah, so I kind of got myself sidetracked. So we have ourselves, we have that planning committee, steering committee that, they meet, we kind of go through vision exercise with them in a meeting. We'll go through like a sort of a plan recommendation priority meeting with them, and then we go through an action agenda implementation meeting with them. So if we have, those are 3 big milestones that we'll have deliverables. We ask them to review, give comment back and forth to us as sort of that working group.
Typically, how long would those meetings last?
90 minutes. We usually try to keep those at a 90-minute level, just at a respective time, time or what
Sure.
have you.
Is there handouts for preparation that they should have before they come?
We'll typically, it depends what the sort of the meeting topics is, but any of that kind of stuff, whether it's things, a lot of times it's more things we're giving you and we're going through at the meeting, and then you kind of have maybe some homework, if you will.
Okay.
And by homework, I mean, it's like a review, we may be giving things now in we're given 2 weeks. If you can then give us some comments by that 2 weeks, we give that deadline, right? Because it's, again, the same kind of thing. Like if you don't, then it sort of like lags on and it's like, doesn't sort of, we forget about things, right?
Sure.
So it's usually some things to sort of provide to us following sort of the discussion session where we're working and explaining and highlighting, this is the content we're going over today. Okay, now I realize it's the first time you're seeing this, take 2 weeks and then give us, some feedback or what have you, those kind of things.
area plan will coordinate and schedule these meetings?
So typically, yep, so our other groups of the Area Plan Commission, their role at the end of the day is fundamentally the when the process is finished, the recommendation for adoption. Once they do that, then it goes back to the commission for the formal adoption. So those two bodies, that's their official roles. Now, the day-to-day organization of kind of how the meetings for the steering committee group, we just need a point of contact. So if that's you or the staff individual or whoever, all we need is like logistics for a room and, make sure we are coordinating with the individuals in terms of, is the logistics of the, meeting or time or date or location or what have you. So that can be through Area Plan Commission, that can be a staff person. We just need a point of contact that is that liaison for us that can kind of help on those. That point of contact typically also is our assistance for on the public side. We usually do have at least two public workshops, for lack of a better word, where one again is sort of in that first phase of the project where it's more of again like the visioning, big idea, just like we would with the sort of the discussion around the table with the steering committee. We do the same with the public, right? Like you have a chance to come in, give us some thoughts or ideas. We usually launch a online survey, so a digital platform as well that has.
These public meetings, is this facility large enough based on your experiences?
Yeah.
Okay.
We usually, as long as it's typically somewhere, we use libraries, we use things that are known, like a community facility or a community room or what have you, that has some space. We'll typically have boards and graphics, like, things set up that people can come to and provide, some feedback again in various topics, right? Because we know we have to already start arranging things in these topics. So we oftentimes have things organized in sort of, these topical elements.
What sources do you use in order to advertise this meeting?
Yep, so we'll rely on a lot of, again, with kind of the short burst time frame, we'll rely on some of the digital medias that perhaps as a county, if you have social media platform or website, your typical, kind of methods that you'll promote. We give typically we'll brand the products, obviously each, I don't know where the other one is at the moment, but it has a look to it or a logo or whatever, right? So we'll create like a digital flyer that can be printed out and distributed, stuck on wherever. That can be emailed. We encourage our steering committee. That gets sent to the steering committee, as an attachment, like share this on your, if you have a group that you're representing, share that, with them, what have you. So we typically give you a flyer and a digital card that can be, used for, again, typically a community or a county has a social media, official platform that they can, share that onto. With regards to the meeting location, we always like to make sure that it's accessible, obviously, and parking or weather kind of things aren't, a challenge. Sometimes I will say, and again, this can vary, there's no right or wrong. Sometimes, a municipality or a county or what have you will choose so I'll say the library as an example, use that as a generic site, so it's not a county office or a city hall or that kind of thing.
It's a fairgrounds.
Because it eliminates sort of the perceptual barrier of like, I'm coming to the courthouse or I'm coming to City Hall. And so to have something, we've done it like in community facilities, the schools, library, church, things again that are accessible and are known, but sometimes sort of the location maybe is more of something that's more, when I say neutral, like, sometimes people don't necessarily want to come to the courthouse, but they'll stop into a community building somewhere, right? Like it's a different sort of perception or feeling. And that's, again, just a sort of a personal, whatever you think, for our standpoint, is whatever you think will get more, the most people feeling that they can,
More comfortable.
and participate, whatever that is.
And how many of those do you propose?
I'm sorry?
How many of those?
There's usually two. So there's one, and for the public side on the workshops, there's usually one. They're in that visioning stage, and then there's usually one after we've gone through that second meeting with the steering committee where we have some sort of draft plan recommendations. Once again, we would want to take those plan recommendations, out to the public so they get a chance. And there's this, we usually do an online survey for both of those that's open for a couple of weeks. So we usually launch that survey at the public workshop because we know, again, we're trying to provide as many avenues as possible for people to be able to, like, so some people want to come physically, respond to a board or a comment in person. Some people just want to scroll and, fill in the survey thing. So it's the same, we usually try to do roughly the same material on both the digital and the workshop in person. We usually launch the digital version, let's say the survey, we usually launch that at the workshop. And then, as I said, it's usually open for a couple of weeks following that, just so we can get it closed and then obviously gather and summarize the input, effectively and what have you.
Have you found one website to be more effective than another within a county to get this information out?
So we usually so plans that maybe are longer or not through OKRA process where the timeline is more crunched, sometimes we will create a standalone project website or that kind of thing, and that's something we can do. What we find is that there's an audience already built, usually with the sort of the local government site, right? So if I were to launch the Oakland City 2055, no one knows that exists. Like, you have to build an audience for that, whereas the city of Oakland City's website here, we're able to just give material and they put it on their website and social media because they already had an audience. So when we were doing things at a time period that was more, you're needing to, you're under this sort of deadline, right? That's oftentimes expedites kind of the dissemination and distribution of the information. We can do it either way. We can create our own project website if you prefer.
Guys have any take on that? Any thoughts?
My thoughts?
I don't
Since we're
see-
trying to make a little video here for the people, I look at this as we've got to have participation, because this is the definition of the few ruling the many. Because these, if you look at the information that's provided in your documents in both, the participation rate that you have is very low, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about less than 100 people for the city of Oakland.
So the committee said this is obviously
You got really nice graphs, but you don't have enough data. I'm a data person, right?
Yep.
Very data driven. And so that's like what's the size of this grant
the
overall?
dollar amount.
Yeah, overall.
$50,000.
$50,000.
68 or 9?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're the higher population. Let me verify that.
But for something like that, I look at, I would rather have all that money put towards getting more surveys and more people input than having a pretty looking book.
So
I don't know, you say public outreach, and I know a lot of people look at our website to get information, but that's not reaching everybody. That's more people
Right.
looking for information.
I don't have an
The thing
answer
comes
for
to
that.
my mind is Grant County scanner freaks.
Yeah,
Everybody looks at that to see what's going on. If I could get in contact with them to post something about it,
Absolutely.
I know everybody looks at that page.
absolutely. I think that the communication, when we've been in the meetings before for comprehensive plans, because I understand how critical this is to the future and the planning that we're doing. And all this planning is being done by just a handful of people in Oakland, California, or Blackburn County here.
That was Oakland, Indiana.
And then we look at this and says, oh, well, 80% of the people decided, want to do this or that. Well, it's 80% of 20 people in the community. That's not represented to everyone.
The other thing,
And then people need to know it. I think if they know it.
see, Todd, I think the other thing, I think it's going to be important that we get the contract posted because this county has agreed to the terms of the contract in regard to the services that Scott's group's going to, we're kind of pigeonholed into that because we've agreed.
Right. I'd love to see
this
that
is,
contract.
anything over and above that is subject to an additional cost.
Correct.
Yeah, I'd love to see the contract. And can we, within the contract, can we as the steering committee or the APC, I don't know which one holds the most weight with that, is to be able to direct, we would rather spend most of what we can get from your company towards more and better data and less on making the graphs. I can make the graphs.
We're locked into the contract.
Yeah, but you do a little bit on the graphs, but I'm asking, can we
I think
move more
the bottom line is
surveys?
that we have, as any of the committees, we're gonna have to make sure that the public's involved.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
however
And so- right,
we just
so-
want to maximize the input that we're receiving.
Correct, yeah. And on these, obviously, like, I can't manufacture people if they don't want to, come or participate, and I can't manufacture that. We provide, when I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of a community, so the community made their due diligence to provide information, make things available, provide opportunity. If in Oakland City, I don't know what the number is. but
Wait,
only X amount of people
I'm
paying-
not asking you to manufacture data, okay? That's not what I'm asking. It's a difficult task, and your suggestion is incredible. That's where I would be going, right? Is what's the most popular social media sites and to get permission to be able to put something that's reasonably, political, because a lot of the real popular sites, they don't want anything political on there. And so you'll get bounced out. But
that's where I was thinking.
but we got to get permission, and I think we would, because it's a good cause, don't you?
So the digital graphic, the PDF of the flyer, what have you, if that's shared, I don't know the site that you referenced, but if you share those kind of things that we,
It's just a group on Facebook.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could put it on there or even
Yeah.
a web link and then
Right.
let us know.
Because what we're doing as a community now is not working. It's so like things were posted and so on about the solar issue. We'll throw that out, and then things start happening, and this is what's happening in all the communities around, is then the word of mouth gets out and there's already been decisions made, and then the community builds, and then you get this groundswell of community saying, we want to do this, and it's.
That's what we got to get
Yeah, I know.
So
the community ends up hearing about, why didn't we hear about it? Well, we put it in the paper in the back page, and we've got to do a better effort with that. And I'm not putting blame anywhere. It's a hard thing to do. We have so much social media and so on, and people don't pay attention to the paper. It's a difficult request is what I'm asking, and what I guess where I want to go is to be able to take the contract. I'd love to see the contract. And is it worded in such a way that the steering committee can say, let's spend more time with this?
No.
We've got to divvy it out exactly. Now we can still carry on and go through the 13 points and address them, but it doesn't say that we have to be in a hardback book.
Well, no, that obviously,
Right.
kind of,
Okay.
but the content still has to be created and developed and summarized and documented. So from an outreach standpoint, fundamentally, there's the 3 steering committee meetings, the 2 public visioning workshops, the 2 online surveys, the public hearing, the 2 public hearings at the end of the process as well. That's kind of the umbrella of kind of the public kind of feedback and comments. We, obviously, when things are funded locally or differently, we've done a variety. And one of the public workshops perhaps could be like at a farmer's market, if you don't want to do it as a sort of a community, event in here at the library or what have you. We do those kind of things. We do meeting in a box where we prepare things, and like the Rotary Club goes through things, or we prepare mobile displays where for a period of 2 months, like this display thing rotates, around the community to various venues for people to provide input. We've done digital input where people on texting, we set up a whole text. All of that is not scoped to do. Those would be things that are beyond what sort of the criteria in terms of the Okra level. So in our contract, in order to get through the process, document everything, get the mapping and the graphics, and the sort of the series of meetings, that the three, the steering committee meeting sessions, the public visioning workshop, the public priority workshop, the 2 online surveys, and your 2 public hearings, those 7 or 8, that's what's scoped in terms of kind of the sort of the community outreach.
So could I just ask, I think we'll come to an agreement here in that this carries, at the end of the day, the final product carries more weight and is a better product with more public input, right? When you have your data numbers over to the side and there's 20 people that you pulled data from, right? There's 20 individual people made up this graph. If it's 2,000 people, that's a much better graph.
Nobody's questioning that, Tom.
Right?
Yeah.
You agree with me with that.
The
And so that's
burden
what we need to do.
of getting that information is going to fall on our shoulders.
Right.
Because Scott's only contracted to perform what
Well,
he
that's why I wanna
just
see the
described that he's
contract.
going to perform.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be the role of us, whether it's back to town councils, whether it's back to I would strongly encourage anybody on this steering committee list, to engage themselves in trying to gather participation. In order to strengthen, and nobody's doubting that the more feedback we get, the stronger the result is.
Right.
But it's our burden. I want to make sure that's clear.
Okay.
It's our burden to do that. Scott has a defined contract, and we're not going to change that contract. Now,
Right.
he could perform additional services for an additional cost, but that would have to go to the council. Wait, you tell me where that has to go.
Well, from a citizen standpoint, you don't want to get the most money or the biggest bang for the money, right? And you want to put out the best report you can, right?
So again, how all those are always, for the Okra processes, we know what their cap is, right? We know what that is. We know we have to create these maps. We know we have to do all the demographic and census data research. We know we have to do, so all of those, kind of the time to sort of do that is factored in. Then you add okay, here are a series of meetings, and that's what makes up the level of effort. So as you're correctly, saying,
Yeah,
obviously no one argues, that's why, for instance, so just north of here, Kosciuszko County, we did their comprehensive plan. I did not bring theirs today. It was double the cost of the Okra process. Okra gives these grants maybe to rural or smaller or economic qualified areas, right, for level of efforts that otherwise you wouldn't be able to sort of do. So it's this, it's sort of their, if you will, attempt to make sure that a rural community, Oakland City could have never done this had Okra not given them resources to sort of do this. So they kind of set up, here's your criteria, here's sort of what the scope is to kind of, meet to sort of do, areas to kind of, we spent probably 7 months in Kosciuszko just on outreach. Your whole process is roughly, from a production standpoint, that same amount of time. So that's sort of the difference.
How many people did you get?
In Kosciuszko?
Yeah.
Oh, I without looking it up.
Oh, okay.
But it was a lot, they did a lot, we did a lot of different things, for them.
Can any extra things be added along the way if approved by the proper channels, or should that have been initiated from the start?
So I'm going to answer that in 2 parts because I don't know Part B's answer. Part A's answer from our standpoint is, yeah, we can always adjust scope and, modify or change, kind of things as appropriate, during that process. From Mike Kleinpeter and the grant administrator side of things, I don't know, if you can add or modify, or kind of change some things. You certainly can't eliminate, things that they're asking for, but if you as a community want to say, oh, we have X amount of additional level of resources that we'd like to put into this, because the caveat is you're assuming that you're also changing sort of your end date, right? If you're adding stuff to it, you're adding time. And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think In talking to Mike, I think the other possibility is that we complete the Okra requirements. If this county wants to go deeper to add to that plan, that can be done at a later date, once we've met the Okra requirements. Now, who creates the survey questions and so forth?
We would draft those,
You're
and then
gonna
that
do-
usually gets sent to the, so it's, we don't do that in a formal meeting perhaps necessarily at all, but we will, after our first meeting, prior to the public visioning session, where that would be launched, is we would send you the, here are the, kind of is the survey, any comments on that, this will be launched at our public workshop. That's how that typically happens.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions, you guys? We got an hour in here, so we're gonna wrap this up. Our meetings are good.
I would assume in those visiting sessions, you're gonna do like a SWOT.
Yeah, so we would, the SWAT, the strength visioning, we would do that with the steering committee, and then a form of, I keep flailing around here in the room like there's boards set up or something, but, we'd have different stations maybe that are topics that it's all talking about that, like, what are some challenges in the community, what are some strengths, what are some areas of opportunity, or what have you, right? And again, we want to be broad, certainly at that, because again, we have a lot of different topics we need to get at least some sort of feedback on or what have you. So, yeah, the SWOT would be usually, or in some form of a SWOT, would be part of that.
Which this book pretty well lays out. I mean, all the information in this book's gonna be pretty well copied, so to speak. I mean, the format.
The format, because of the criteria that you have to go through, the format on these, if I would have brought a sample like Kosciuszko that is not an Okra one, the format, like the organization of the material in terms of land use, it's all it is all there. It's presented differently in terms of it doesn't go by 14 chapters. The only reason this is organized the way it is and why I brought these samples is because this is an Okra, funded project.
Do you have a projected outline of events through this process? We're gonna start with the steering committee meeting.
So in our scope of work, and the contract has those, yes.
Oh, okay, it has that,
Yep.
a series of events that are gonna take place within the contract.
Yep, so that.
We gotta get
the-
that contract posted.
The scope is very process oriented, so.
Recorded, so I can go pull it from the recorder's office. I think it did, so.
We can download that into the APC website.
I think
So your attachment A in the contract is always the scope, and the scope is the steps 1 through 12 or whatever it is, without, that's the steps we're going through. Yep,
Right.
yep.
So,
And so that shows you I have a, this is not this is not the signed one.
Yeah, I think they are.
This isn't the signed one, but, so that's not the signed one, but this is it. And it goes through, here's step 1, here's step, 2, step 3, it goes through each step. Here's the summary of phase 1, here's phase 2, and it's all, here's what you get in terms of, so it goes through all of those things. Yep.
Katie, I think Ryan sent this to the APC.
that contract,
Yeah,
I think
at
so.
least I know that I have seen it
I think he sent it to you guys, I didn't get it.
via email at some point. Do we have access to his emails? We do not. That's all.
So,
Okay.
I believe after the commissioner signed it, it did get recorded, I believe. I could be wrong, but if it did, I can go pull it and I can scan it and email you a copy.
Scott, would you have enough time for us to make a photocopy of that?
Yeah, sure, well, I can,
Or I can run it upstairs and make a copy real quick.
let
While you
me,
guys are,
You guys want a copy? You want a hard copy?
Yeah.
I can probably, Mike Kleinpeter would have the executed one that was sent to the state, but I have a digital version of that as well.
It's not court evidence. I don't need to care if it's signed. as long
Well,
as-
no, I just want to make sure that, because there's different drafts on occasion, I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I don't think any of this changed, but,
I don't think it did.
do you have an email that I can just
Yeah.
email attachment here to you?
Yeah.
That would work.
What was the document called, do you know?
Well, for us, it's the professional services agreement, but I don't know what.
I don't know what I got put
I don't know
under.
internally what might have been called. Okay, so let's try this.
It's KKABEL.
Yes.
I have 2 questions, if I might interject and ask if you would allow.
We are going to allow any questions you have, Michael.
Come up so we can hear you well.
How many copies do I need?
Yeah,
I'm hoping that people really pay attention to this.
Well,
Does everybody want a copy of that? So I can
first question's real simple. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
What is the hard deadline for the completion of the project? Given the start dates here, there's ambiguity there. Do we have a hard deadline? And if so, what is it? And if not, what's the flexibility on establishing a hard deadline?
My discussions with Mike Klein, Peter, were that the target is a year. He's going to expect that a copy be available, be given to Okra for review within that 12-month period of time.
Okay.
He says, depending on what Okra's backlog is, or lack of backlog, will depend on how quickly they can process the document that we've given them. Is that
So
accurate?
I'm sorry, I was
Go
half
ahead.
listening there because I was coordinating. So maybe reinforce what you just said. Typically, our process, we try to do the facilitation of the planning work in roughly 8 months. Again, so that goes to the whole, like, in terms of if you want to spend 6 months on outreach, well, there's no time to actually do any, this. So we like to spend, and this is what we talked about in our interview with the commissioners, we like to spend 8 months or so on the process, knowing that there's a month or two in the beginning, because your grant, as I mentioned, your timeline started at the award of funds, which is not when we were contracted to start. So we know, like, there's a month or two maybe in the beginning, and we know at the end, when we submit the draft to Okra, the state tells us they are reviewing for 30 days. I can tell you, and I'm not speaking negatively, that is very quick for them to give us a turnaround. It's usually
Understand.
45 days plus. So we know that there's some lag time at the end. And then following that, then we have to go through the APC and the commissioner adoption. And with those, we usually just meet, like, what is your regular, whatever you meet the third Thursday of the month, we just get on the regular schedules for those, and there's time for that.
Is that after Okra approval?
No,
Or that's before?
they want that, but that's after Okra, like, reviews and approves, yes,
Okay.
but it's still part of, they see it's still part of your timeline. So you can.
12-month timeline?
Yes, so you can see how it's like very constricted at the front end and the back end. And why we like to do our process in that just kind of 8 months, because we know we have these other issues. If for some reason Okra takes longer than their 30 days and it's delaying things, they don't penalize in terms of, like, they realize, like, the delay is on their end, it's not on you as a community's end. So from that standpoint, they're flexible. And again, as I said, like, there's not really a penalty necessarily. Mike would have to work with you for an extension if you're going beyond that. But that's something that I'm sure you can speak with him about in terms of that process.
Well, given you said that there was a signed contract around May 5th with
Your award
you gentlemen.
for that, yep.
And the Okra was somewhere in mid-March.
that.
Are we looking at March 2024 then as the
25.
deadline for 25, yeah, I was thinking 2023 for some reason. So that's going to be the hard date we're all shooting for as a community.
Mike would usually, so let me see if he has sent this to me.
I mean, that sounds like an action item, actually.
From an
It is
aspect
too.
of project management, it's good to have a hard date to know
Yeah,
what we're
yeah.
shooting for. And you adjust your
And it sounds to me like we
Mike-
don't have that, but that's an action item, just to get a real hard date.
Initially, based on your March award of funds, give or take, end of this year, December would have been your plan to Okra, because then your next, your January and Feb, because your end of February would have been, I'm just rounding months easily, right? Your end of February would have, if you were awarded at the beginning of March, end of February would have been your 12 months. So your last 2 months, Okra would have wanted it in December. So now we're July, we're already to the point in my recommendation or observation that you're gonna have to get an extension. Because we're in July, and if they want to see something in December, you're
We're working
already.
on
December, I thought we were talking March. That's why we need a hard
That's
deadline.
no, so.
That's
you're-
what he's trying to explain.
Yeah, so like your process for them to get their draft to review, if they take 30 days and you have 30 days to do your adoption or what have you, that's 2 months. So you back off when you need to give them, by 2 months, and I'm doing easy math here, if you use that, that's February and January, then I'm assuming Mike Kleinpeter would tell me that like your target is December for your Okra draft, which is less than 6 months now.
You're under a pretty tight
Right,
time frame.
correct, correct.
Yeah, unless you get.
Have I showed any anxiety in the APC meetings?
Yes, a little
Okay.
bit. That's why you're.
That's what I'm saying, there is flexibility. You're not, I was supposed to say you're not penalized, like they will work with you, but you'll just need to have that conversation with Mike regarding like, we need a 6 month extension or whatever it is, and that has happened before. I mean, we work in communities that has happened.
He didn't give me that when I.
Well, because it's not, I mean,
Appreciate
Well,
it.
that's why I asked the question about hard deadline to know what kind
Yeah.
of time frame for the data accumulation. The development, the staff work you do to put together a document and do all the all the representations,
Yeah.
the graphics and the production. So I just wanted to.
That extension doesn't impact your contract or your,
no, for us, it's we have the list of the items in that scope that we'll go
Okay, so
through.
your
and
contract's not timed.
We'll still do each one of those things. We, of course, have organized it, then that goes to the reason why there's 2 public meetings and not 5, is because in our 8 month, we can only do, you can only do so much, right? So that's why there was those 2. So we will still do those 2, obviously.
so would we be strongly encouraged to?
And by the way, Scott, my name's Michael.
Hi.
I'm just a member of the public in here asking a question or
Nope.
2 right now.
Well, hopefully I'm explaining something. I hope so.
Well, and I made my point.
Second question?
Second question is, in terms of the Okra process, you said there were 13 items that would be articulated, or elements that would be articulated in the document. And I'm looking at Indiana State Code,
Yep.
and this is where the question comes from.
Yep.
There's 18 items in Indiana State Code as for elements that would be contained in a comprehensive plan.
So the second,
And I'm wondering in my mind how these elements, down here through R, which there's 18 of them, how those elements match up what's required by the
Yeah.
Okra process, and if that encompasses all of those, or if there were certain ones that
So this
Okra
is,
leaves out.
right, so the 3 that I mentioned, the things that
Right,
the most
the
contain is
overviews,
this.
right, mhm.
That's what I'm saying, in the code, it gives community suggestions.
Okay.
These are not
And
required.
that's what Okra requires.
Okra
is
define, they give
what
you,
you
we
went through.
have,
Okay.
correct, they give you the list. The state statute gives you these 3 things, and then all of these are just suggestions.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, well,
Yep.
fair enough.
Yep.
I asked the question from the standpoint that I would want the comprehensive plan to be in compliance with Indiana code.
Yep.
Okay, and you got an answer?
I did.
All
And
right.
just so what we were looking at, Randy, was straight out of Indiana code, that section 503 of the comprehensive plan citation.
Yep, and you
I
sent that to me.
sent you that page.
Okay.
I didn't send you the front page. I can make a copy and send that to you.
Okay,
The other thing I'll highlight, we always do this at our public workshop, what have you, even the steering committee meeting, we always, again, highlight like what a comp plan is and what it is not, because it's sometimes confusing for people. A comprehensive plan is a guiding document, like a statement of vision, policy, what have you. It is not a legislative document. It is not law. Whereas people get that convoluted with, say, zoning as an example. A future land use plan or discussion in a comp plan does not change any zoning. It does not modify what anyone can or cannot do. It provides a suggestion for things. Parks and Rec, same thing. It does not create a park and rec master plan, but it provides a suggestion for what, as a community, you may be kind of wanting to do. So if you think about kind of implementation that follows a comprehensive plan on the policy side, a community, a county, oftentimes reviews and updates, so their zoning code, their unified development ordinance, that often is a follow-up to the comprehensive plan, because there may be things highlighted in the comp plan that like, oh, we want to do, so I'll use a city as an example, like, because I'm looking across the street, we want to do a mixed-use development in this parking lot across the street, and we looked at our zoning, and our zoning doesn't allow us to do that idea. So clearly, we need to change or update our zoning code in order to allow that idea that we all talked about to be able to be a possibility, a possibility. So that's one kind of just minute example of kind of how a legislative document perhaps follows the comprehensive plan document, but they are two separate things, and the zoning has law, like legal teeth to it. A comprehensive plan does not. It is just a guidance tool. It is not a law tool. There may be things that maybe a couple of your other communities maybe talk about, like we'd like to have, this area as part of a growth area for our said, community. The comprehensive plan may address, like, this is a growth area for X community. A growth area could in the future be translated into, well, in order for this to happen, again, maybe Marion will need to annex this because sewer, water, emergency service, all those public services need to be provided by the city and not whoever it is, right? And so that becomes an annexation discussion. The comprehensive plan does not annexation make. It may talk about how are you managing growth, or what do you want to do with maybe said growth as an example, but it is not, the comprehensive plan is not annexation, identification, nor is it zoning. So those are legislative, legal, kind of processes and documents that are separate and not, although they could talk to one another, they are not a comprehensive plan and vice versa. So I think that's something that we always try to be very, very clear about as well, because I think people sometimes, it's for us as planners, we use kind of jargon and words and what have you, and I think sometimes there is some confusion on that we always want to be very clear about.
Okay. Other questions from anyone?
So I think you passed out the copies of the contract.
They're printing
Oh,
up
okay.
right now.
Okay.
I've had two before I could run back down
Okay.
here, so
Give them to Michael and Todd.
they should be done in a
Other,
So this TSWDG,
Yeah, that's our, so Taylor Cedar Winds Design Group. So after that's presented, then we just use the
but
initial thread.
that's a group within.
That's us, that's my
Client
firm. That's our firm.
Peter. That's your firm. 'Cause there was a client Peter,
That's who applied
Easy
for
Oak or Grant?
The client,
they applied for the grant.
correct.
And this is your company, okay.
The-
I just wanted to clear that up in my mind.
Yep, so the client would be the county commissioners, because they are the legal fiduciary contracting group. And Taylor Cedar Williams Design Group was who they hired or whatever.
Okay.
And we just, so Taylor Cedar, that's the initials of the firm name.
Okay.
So that'll reference us, the client references the county. Yep, yep.
Thank you.
So I think the other thing is you all are kind of discussion and moving forward, we did send, I think Ryan previously, right? Kind of an Excel spreadsheet. These are kind of the typical cross-section of folks, entities, organizations that would be.
It was this, for the steering committee, right?
Yes, that, and then it was, we did an Excel chart there as well for that. Typically, the steering committee is, 12, give or take, what have you, 12, 15, 8, if, what have you. But it typically, we kind of see a cross-section of, kind of representation on that. In the scope, you'll also see, in addition to kind of, I mentioned that your public workshops and your steering committee meetings, we did identify also 3 key person or focus groups, however you want to describe those, right? So that could be something, nowadays we often, maybe we'll do the 3 focus groups on maybe Zoom, or maybe one's in person, two's in Zoom, what have you. So if there are entities or organizations perhaps that we want to make sure we have a targeted conversation with, that can be part of one of those interview, discussion meetings. That would be appropriate. So I think kind of thinking about sort of who the people are that fill in the blanks here, right? For the sort of representation of your steering committee list is kind of step number 1. Once that gets identified, then we can do one of two things. So we, again, this varies, depends on kind of how kind of a local, agency or municipality prefers. We can invite the individuals to, we have we'll draft a letter that says, this is what the comp plan is, your expectation is, 3 meetings, and kind of these key points throughout the next several months. And our first meeting, to kind of do the sort of the visioning kickoff and orientation of the comp plan will be held on X date here, wherever, wherever we want to do that at. That letter can either come from us as the consultant, or it can come from the client, in this case, the county. So sometimes I'll give you an example, like sometimes say that, the city or the county or whoever, they want to be sort of removed, if you will. And again, not having the meeting at the local town hall or city hall or county courthouse, not having the invitation come from the county, there's a different perception, right? When I'm inviting you to participate versus when the municipality or the governmental agencies.
We'll let you do it, Scott.
Okay, because I'm like, we do it either way.
Yeah, and we're
That can happen either
close to
way.
confirming this.
Okay.
In the event that someone wanted to propose additional membership than what you've got listed of the 15, that's our decision, correct?
Correct, yeah, we typically, like, if the group gets so big, it's difficult to kind of get people together or work from. That's why I reference the focus groups or the key person interviews, because we can always get a like group together so obviously I know from your previous discussions that you and I have had, your ag and your solar group is a very important discussion topic. Well, in Kosciuszko, as an example, we had a whole focus group. That was the group discussion. Clearly there was a representative on the steering committee, but the whole steering committee wasn't all of that, because then we're not talking about parks. I'm not getting the police discussion regarding hazard mitigation. Like, we got to talk about these other, subject matters as well.
Right.
We don't have a law enforcement representative on here.
So that would be, certainly a potential.
That's where it comes to that 13 points. We want to make sure we have representation of 1 or 2 people that represent each one of those 18 points.
That'd be Jeff
We
Couch.
can have those
We need
here.
Bob
Sure,
Jackson.
that works, people, yeah.
Yeah, Bob Jackson
And
for
then
presidency.
Outreach, we can do that, like, very
That's what I would usually
responding.
recommend. Again, it's fine if we hear, I usually think the public sessions go a little bit better.
Or whoever you
Neutral
appoint.
site
Right.
versus I have to go to the courthouse or I have to go to City Hall.
And then
Right.
transportation
So I didn't know.
is,
But these would
Like
be,
Mr.
this would
White,
be
Dave
suitable
White.
for
Yep.
a working group meeting, I would say yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Katie, we're going to add hazardous mitigation Bob Jackson on this list.
Okay.
this works.
Okay, do you see anybody additionally we need on there? On that list? Any other representations?
Because the points, well done, Brian.
Okay. All right.
So out of those points,
I have another copy.
What?
What do you need?
This. We're good. Shane,
Okay.
Ada's got one, Todd's got one, you got one, I have one. Shane's
I can get
okay.
you one.
So out of those, we've got land use, government fiscal capacity.
Yeah.
You got somebody there, public facilities and services.
So that again is like your public works or any kind of like your
We got people
road, like
there.
your like the county engineer, that's your county engineer.
Okay. Placemaking, do we have somebody for that?
So if you have like a county arts or tourism or anything like that, that would be that person.
What was the county engineer one?
Tour and Visitors Bureau.
The
we're
county
trying-
engineer would be David White.
And that would
Right.
usually be like your public facilities person, like that,
What about
so
the
your
people that,
roads, utilities, those sorts of
well, we got,
things.
the
Right.
Gas City just put up the fine arts, for theater, right? Do they get somebody, a committee for that?
Yeah, Cindy's gonna separate.
We have a true tour and travel.
You also have the Orchestrate Indiana person.
Yeah.
So I don't know, the website, I found the Fusion Arts Alliance, I don't know.
I found a website and it goes to an email, but I
Okay, so there's no
haven't yet
person
to
for that.
get a response.
So
Yeah.
For the
if you
Fusion
have a
one.
county, so the Grant
Fusion
County Visitor
Arts.
Tourism, is there a person there? That would be that person too.
And some of these, they can double up.
Of
so-
course,
right?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
And then economic development, well, there's somebody from the economic development committee, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And then housing, who's representing housing?
So sometimes that's also economic development person.
Which the Economic Growth Council just had a housing study.
Right, so that's often, yes, so oftentimes
Which
that,
I've seen in your
you're
book.
talking about that, like,
Which is-
oftentimes they can speak on behalf of that
Right.
topic.
Some of these can
It's
fit
growth.
both,
Correct,
so.
correct.
I've seen it,
Yeah,
Okay.
my opinion is that's not. So on housing, I wonder if we should get somebody from a housing perspective of the homeless. I mean,
So again-
perspective of, from people, not the developers, right? But from the people that have the need.
So for
I'm not
instance-
quite sure where that would be.
That
Go
would
ahead,
come in
I'm
the
sorry.
public comment.
Or like a focus group. So as an example, if we have these three, stakeholder interviews or focus groups. So for instance, like someone maybe that has maybe a senior, component, maybe a disadvantaged or a home, whatever, if they're working with a mission or what have you, maybe a religious institution, that kind of, 3 or 4 people would be a good focus group discussion. And they necessarily, can still provide input, but you don't necessarily need them on like the actual, like, maybe the committee, the steering committee, but you do a focus group with those entities and we go through a series of questions and get their perspective regarding these issues from, that focus group. That's a way to do that.
That, and I don't disagree with you on that one, but that's inside Marion more or less, I feel
Versus
like,
the county
versus
level.
outside in the county, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're probably much better, I mean, you see it.
Yeah,
all
I
around.
do, but that's more, it would be more of a Marion thing, and we don't cover Marion. They have their own.
Want us all to be
level
one
of that-
happy family and hold hands,
You know, it'd make my life a little easier, but it doesn't work that
Your level
I
of
way.
know.
that is probably the county health department. That's probably.
Right,
that's
which
probably
one
that
of
one.
their people is on here,
Yeah, so
so.
that's where that kind of, those social issues would probably be like,
represented.
yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do we have that?
We have a health department.
Okay. Transportation, we've got agriculture. Do we have good agriculture rep? And not just big ag.
Yeah.
Like how many like people are trying to homestead in the county?
Yeah, that's a consideration when,
What?
I mentioned that earlier.
Coming from somebody trying to buy a house for the first time,
Yeah.
not fun.
Shane and I are ag reps, but it may be that we want to pull an independent
Yeah.
ag rep. that's
About somebody like
associated
Kenny
with
Case
Yeah,
or Wendell Case. Wendell Case.
Yeah.
Or how about somebody younger? I'm not saying you guys aren't young, but what about Nolan Holloway? He's always at those meetings too.
And again, I would say like in my mind, one of your key stakeholder sessions or focus group, like, the local farm bureau, what have you, like we did that to me is one of your groups that you're gonna wanna do one of those sessions with. So that would again cover a broader
Right.
representation of sort of those perspectives perhaps.
Got those guys.
yeah.
Natural resources.
So is there a county,
So we will-
is there a parks department or soil and water, like, is there a county parks department? I guess I don't know the answer to that. No, okay, so it'd be your soil and water or park, like anybody that's involved in that kind of thing.
That'd be,
What about DNR officer?
How many times did you say you meet with these?
When I think natural resources,
Focus groups, we'd have 3.
I think of that
Maybe
also.
once,
It's another
but
component
we usually do
that gets
3
kind of
different
skipped over.
sessions.
Good
Does that make sense?
soil and water, that'd be Butch.
Butch Embry.
Uh-huh. And I've got his phone number. I don't know if you've met Butch.
Pardon?
I don't know if you've met Butch.
No.
I don't think so. He's funny. He's a character.
And Parks and Rec, broadband, somebody to represent that?
In my mind, there's been so much advancement on the when that was added a couple of years ago, it was clearly identified that like areas were really struggling with things. There's been a lot of push on broadband improvement throughout the state.
Broadband is fiber optic.
Yes, any area, your internet, like all of
I
that.
have different companies from Spectrum
But how's your
to.
coverage? Like you have service, the county level has service.
Depends on the area. I know they're putting it in everywhere right now. It's been picking spots.
So.
Is there a plan, put it this way, is there a plan for it? Is it planned out?
Ask Spectrum.
So right
They only
now,
call us for the meter.
A
They
few years
just
ago,
go in and do
we as a
whatever.
county paid for a broadband study.
Right. Right,
And now, I mean, there's, the whole western side of Grant County has fiber.
right, it's really
spectrums
advanced, right.
So I mean, you'd have to really do another study to know.
I think a lot of places got it,
So-
especially after COVID.
That's,
too.
that's what I'm saying. Like, when this element was added, this was not an element prior to the last 3 or 4 years. And then the state gave a lot of funding to do those broadband studies, identify needs. A lot of communities, counties, regions have been able to focus and funnel resources to elevate their broadband levels. What we're finding is that in the broadband chapter, we're able to say, like, there is a plan in place. It is being, like, we're not creating a broadband plan as part of this. What you would want to do initially, why they added it, was like, they were identifying, like, oh my gosh, like, we're discovering areas that don't have any service whatsoever. This needs to be a high priority. What we're discovering now is that there is could everyone always have more? Yes. Could the faster services, technology advances be better? Always yes. However, what we're discovering is that the level of service for broadband technology in general now is, fairly well covered. A community, a county has a plan for it. They are executing it. Oftentimes, that section now is very small because it's not such a devoid, empty piece that it used to be.
I would assume ours would be the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I expect those are the difficult things for you, is to define the is model. Like what is the current state of things? Because it doesn't sound like we have a plan. That's a lot of work for you guys.
Well, we would just map like your current, like this is kind of a coverage area. These are from your broadband study. This is what was identified from the comprehensive plan. We are assuming you are still working through whatever you haven't completed yet on your broadband study. Like those elements would be what would be referenced here. Like that, the assumption is those are still being executed as appropriate, right? That's what that section.
Is that a good assumption?
That was
Okay.
boring, so.
Perhaps input from an IT professor at IWU or Stapler might have impact on the broadband issue or pertinence to the broadband issue.
Yeah, and we are in search of a higher education representative on the steering committee. We haven't, do you have any suggestions on that, Dana, from Taylor? Okay.
See, again, I think you're listing off 3 or 4 providers you have in the area. Like again, when this was initially added, communities had none. So it was like the number one step was like, we got to identify a provider. Well, now we would be like, okay, there's 3 or 4 providers. You need to continue working with the, like that's the kind of thing you're doing now versus like, we have nothing. So it's a little bit, I'm not downplaying that, but I don't know that like, I think you all can speak to like, how your service is, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you can all sort of collaborate and speak to this.
And again, I think it jumped, especially in this county too, when COVID hit, fiber optics was getting put everywhere because kids were at home and they had to do their schooling at home. So it got put in a lot of places.
So the reason you still want it in the comp plan is because if there are things in your broadband study that you still want to execute for whatever reason they haven't been, maybe it's a funding or what have you, if it's in here, then you have another resource to be able to say like, okay, if the state, and I mentioned different kind of things happen at different times, right? So next year, maybe the state decides to put out a new, like, we have a broadband community funding program for eligible communities needs XYZ. If you have it in your comp plan that says we're still trying to do this, you can, like, this is your reference of like why you're applying for that funds, right? Because you put it in here. But we don't need to probably, and again, I'm not downplaying it, but we probably don't need, it's not probably the, the main.
Yeah, it's just one.
It's not the top priority.
Yeah. I'm sure folks from economic development would say like, we can't attract people in our business park unless this level of service is like here, we would want to put that in the broadband section. That's the kind of tie-in and how that would get addressed, as an example.
Right.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up. To protect Scott, if you guys have any questions as a result of this meeting today, please forward them to Katie or I, and we will forward them to Scott, and
We
we'll
connected
share
now because I emailed you that. Yeah.
So
Well, hopefully this was helpful in terms of me trying to kind of explain where things are at, kind of the history from what I would say, I don't mean to speak for Mike on the administration on the grant and OPA side, but I know from our perspective, that's kind of the way things work, and he could obviously give you more details, specifically with the, that side of things.
I'll contact and we'll seek
Yeah.
some additional time, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not comfortable with this time frame that we've got here.
Yeah.
So,
And that's not again set by us, or that's not set by him either. I mean, and again, as I said, the reason why they do that is want to make sure that like things aren't encumbered in terms of funds, that it's like, oh, if a community isn't going to use this, we could have given this to like Henry County or what, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's, I think, why they do that.
how much lead time do you need in regard to scheduling meetings?
But we would typically, in terms of sending out the invitation and inviting people, like, here's whatever, we would at least, I would say, like 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that, like, we wouldn't want to send something in like the meetings next week kind of thing, because people scheduling, you know, you want to make sure you're giving them, just respectful of their time as well, giving them, you know, some time to be able to get that on their calendar or what have you.
Well, I'll try and wrap this steering committee thing up by the end of the week, and we'll get something.
At least planned, or hopefully try to have one the last week of July is what I'm kind of thinking.
Okay.
And that's
To have that first
range.
one
We
somewhere
need
in
to make
there.
this happen pretty quick then. Okay. All right, last minute questions for Scott before we kick him out of here.
The Blackford County book report there, is that in the library at Blackford? How do I get one?
Go to their planning commission, they
I
probably
guess,
have
let
one.
me check here, if I'm still
Be my
connected.
guess.
So we worked with their economic development, let me see.
We go to the courthouse, is that?
Well, I think you can go online.
Oh, cool. Through Blackford County.
Let me see here real quick.
Okay.
No, so we give.
I'll look, I can take a look, I'll figure it out.
We give the comprehensive plan, maybe, you know, there's so many, in the deliverables in the scope, there'll be like so many hard copies, like when I say hard copies, that's the printed, sometimes it's like this, sometimes, whatever, you know,
Yeah.
it looks different, whatever. And then you get the, you know, the digital version. Let's see.
They probably have them in a box like the jail plan. Sitting in a box in the corner. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I hope I wasn't too negative.
No.
All right.
I'm gonna keep you in check.
I appreciate it.
Katie, I think we're ready to bring this to a close.
I'm looking for theirs too, so.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.